The three met in a dark and abandoned classroom, like they were out of some dramatic spy thriller. It was Yang's doing, Blake was sure. Her partner loved that kind of thing, although judging from Sun's grin, he wasn't against the idea. She stepped in and closed the door behind her. "Agent Blake returns," Yang said. "Was your mission successful?" "It was successful," she said, and then, after a poignant pause, added, "I'm not calling you Agent Yang. It's bad enough we have to do this with the lights out. But I'm not playing your silly games. Agent Yang thinks Agent Blake is breaking protocol." She turned to the other blonde. "What does Agent Sun believe?" Agent Blake believes, she interrupted, "that if the two of you don't stop speaking in the third person, she is going to walk away and tell you nothing." She crossed her arms and regarded them with a raised eyebrow. Yang gave in with a loud sigh. "Alright, yeesh. Talk about being a buzzkill. Can't we have a little fun around here? This isn't a game. Do you think I don't know that?" Yang shot her a withering look, and Blake's ire slowly faded. "I'm not saying we don't take this seriously, but there's no reason we can't inject a little levity into what is a messed up situation. Maybe, but I'm not in the mood right now." Blake sighed and pulled a seat out to sit down on. Her eyes met Yang's. "Osmond caught me breaking into his terminal." "Wait, you actually did that? Blake, it was a joke. I didn't mean you should actually try and break into his stuff." "I know, Yang. I know. It's just... Asking Jean would have gotten nowhere. You know what he's like. He would have distracted me or just lied about it. I didn't have a choice. The only way I could think of to find out why Jean was brought here was to learn the headmaster's reasons. And he caught you at it. Great." Yang rubbed a hand down her face and paced about the room. "What's going to happen? Are you in trouble? If you need it, I'll talk to him and say I put you up to it." She would go that far. Blake felt a small smile creep onto her face at Yang's almost immediate offer. "You don't have to," she said. "He caught me, but he said a detention would do. It felt like he knew what I wanted there. He played with me. Said because I didn't get into his files, there was no crime." "Breaking into his office and accessing his terminal isn't bad enough?" Sun asked. "Is discipline always that light around here?" "Well, we did get out of that food fight without so much as a slap on the wrist," Yang said. Blake shook her head. "This is different. He was curious. I think he wanted to know why I did it. Maybe he thought a softer approach would be better." She bit her lip. "A part of me thinks he suspected I was acting as a White Fang traitor, and that was his way of giving me a chance to prove him wrong. He does know about what I was before Beacon. It's a sensible concern to have." "You proved him wrong, right? I don't want to imagine soldiers breaking our door down while I'm in the shower." Blake nodded. "How'd you do it?" There was the difficult question. She tried to think of a good way to put it, but nothing came to mind. In the end, and in the face of an insistent Yang, she told the truth. "I told him about Jean." "You told him? You just up and told him why'd you broken into his office?" Blake cringed. "Yeah." "Oh, wow." Yang rolled her eyes. "So let me get this straight. The first time Sun approached you, he got the full story. And now the first time Osmond approaches you, it's the full reveal for him as well? Ease, Blake. Aren't you meant to be the sneaky one? Is this how things were done in the White Fang as well?" To be fair, the main point of terrorism is to be noticed. Blake's point died off as Yang stared at her. "You don't understand, Yang. He just appeared behind me. I was caught off guard. I didn't know what to do. I also had to convince him I was somehow breaking into his office for a benign reason, and not because I was trying to plant a bomb. Forgive me if I was a little desperate to prove he didn't need to kill me right then and there. Alright. Fine. This isn't a complete loss. So you got out of it with a detention, and the headmaster knows what we're doing." She sighed and sat down on the desk. "I guess that's not a big deal. It's not like we're doing anything against the rules. I'm not sure where we go from here if you didn't find anything though." Blake's face slowly morphed into a wide grin. It didn't take Yang long to notice, and when she did, her eyes widened. "You found something, didn't you?" "I might have." Yang laughed. She kicked off the desk and dragged a chair across to sit in front of Blake. Her eyes were bright, her teeth even more so. "How?" she asked. "No, forget that. What did you find?" Blake took a deep breath and settled herself into a comfortable position as she could. "This is kind of important too," she said. "When I told him the reason I was trying to find out what information he had, he as good as told it to me himself." Blake spared a glance towards Sun and chose her words wisely. "He said he only really pressured Jean to come to Beacon because he knew it would enable you to." She followed it up with a meaningful glance, but Yang called it easily enough. "Huh. Not what I expected. Not sure I believe it either, to be honest. It seems a little convenient for that to be the only reason." Sun raised a hand. Blake shook her head. "Sorry, Sun. That one's a little private." He looked between Yang and her for a moment, but clearly decided not to push when he saw Yang's grimace. Blake appreciated his tact, partly because she didn't expect it out of him. Maybe he learned more from Jean than she thought. "I got into his terminal either way," she said. "That's what I meant about him playing me. When I told him what I was after, he made up some excuse to leave and give me 10 minutes alone with his files. He even gave me the password to Jean's." "Weird. Suspicious, more like." Sun said, "I can't think of any teacher in Haven who would do something like that. You'd have been strung up the moment you broke in, not rewarded and not given free rein. That's ridiculous." "Sun's got a point," Yang said. "I know Osmond can be pretty lax on the rules, both from the food fight but also letting Ruby in early. But this is a bit much. It's especially weird since he knew you might have had way more dangerous motives." Yang gave her an apologetic smile for that, but Blake didn't feel offended. She was right after all. Osmond had good reasons to be concerned, not let her through. "Maybe it was a test," Yang added. "I mean, it's not like you were with the White Fang still. You could have used Jean's details to cause problems." Blake sighed. "That's what you think." "Huh?" "In his files, there were a number of maps. It turns out Jean had a tracker of some kind after he got into Beacon, to make sure he didn't run away. Still private, son," Blake added, earning a sigh from him. "The point is, it made maps of wherever Jean traveled, at whatever time. It even tracked the nights when he went out with me to investigate the White Fang. And if they got a hold of those, it might lead to him being attacked." Yang sighed. "I guess that means Uncle Crow told the truth about the training. You remember he said Osmond was worried about us being targeted? Maybe it was over this." "Maybe," Blake acknowledged. "But I doubt it. You need to remember, it would be a lot of work to find out Jean's presence there, and pretty unnecessary too. You, me, and Weiss were hardly inconspicuous when we busted that warehouse, and then recovered the Paladins." "True. But what's he worried about then? Why give you access to Jean's files?" "Because he wanted me to find something else," Blake said. It was the knowledge that had bothered her ever since, and continued to leave her in a foul mood. She tried to think of a good way to say it, but instead went with the blunt approach. "Those nights where Jean and I snuck out," she said. "The maps show that he went the exact same location exactly one day before we did." "What?" Yang almost fell out of her seat. "What do you mean? Why would he be doing that?" Blake's frustration spilled over. "Isn't it obvious?" she asked. "He did it to keep me from finding anything of value. It's just another example of him putting everyone else before himself, except that he wasted my time by not telling me the places had already been raided." She thumbed her eyes and let out a long breath. "I imagine if they had been dangerous, he would have found some way of delaying or getting us lost." "It wasn't dangerous though, was it? At least he didn't get into any fights." He would have, if your uncle hadn't already taken them down. Imagine what might have happened if the White Fang had been there, or worse, Torchwick. That shut Yang up and sent her smile sprawling into a frown. Did he do it each and every time? Yang asked. I don't know. It's not like I remember the exact dates we went out, and I didn't have long to look at each of the maps. I only checked the first two, but I can't see any other reason for him to spend 2 days in a row at the warehouse. What about the day we raided the warehouse? Blake frowned. What about it? He was here in Beacon. Part of me isn't so sure. Yang mumbled something under her breath and looked away. Never mind, I'll consider that later. The main point is he's running headfirst into danger again. It looks like the trend is more commonplace than we thought. Blake nodded. She rose from her seat and moved towards the door. Where are you going? Yang asked. To confront him, obviously. Whoa, no. Yang launched forward, her seat clattering to the ground. She dove forward and snagged Blake by the arm. It was a wonderful display, but rather pointless since Blake hadn't moved since Yang's opening word. You can't just confront him, she said. Why not? Blake pulled her wrist away and scowled, not at Yang, nor Sun, but the suicidal idiot. What was he thinking, going to those places without her? Did he not imagine what she might have felt if he had been killed? If he had been hurt, and if she only found out days later that it was her fault? I'm not going to stand for him doing this, Yang. It's one thing to push me out of the way of falling piece of rubble, or save me from my own mistake. But this is him, willfully endangering himself. Sun said. I doubt it's happened since. Like that mattered. Blake threw one hand in the air, her expression more than enough to dismiss his point. Yang caught her hand and brought both together, holding them between their bodies. Her face was sincere. I know, Blake. Trust me, I really do. Even if I'm not showing it, I'm as angry, if not more, than you. We can't confront him on it, though. Those weren't the words she wanted to hear. Her eyes scrunched shut and she took a deep breath before opening them once more. When she did, they were as calm as she could make them. A storm still raged inside her, however. Why can't we? She asked. Because he'll deny it, Yang said. He will say he didn't do it, or that you must have read it wrong, or that he went after the event when it was safe. He might even say there must have been a glitch and the dates were wrong. She shrugged one shoulder. You can't prove any of it. Or he could admit it, Sun added, and that would be it. I doubt it's a crime for him to cut ahead of you and go before you did. It's not like you can get him in any more trouble. He's right, Blake. Even if Jean does admit what happened, he can just shrug and ask what the problem is. Technically speaking, wasn't your deal that he would help you check those places? Yang waited for her reluctant nod. Then it's done. He stuck to the promise of helping you. He just checked first to make sure it wouldn't be dangerous. At a risk to himself. She protested. Yeah, and I agree that sucks. Sun's right when he says Jean hasn't broken any rules though. Even if we confront him, nothing will come of it. Hell, we even know the reason why he did it, so it's not like we need to go ask him. Yang let go of Blake's hands and rubbed her forehead. Got to say though, now we know he risked himself on his own. It makes him a serious hypocrite for bitching us out for going as a trio. She grinned. I'll make him pay for that one day. I felt like crap after he told us off. How can you be so relaxed about this? Blake asked, stepping back. She shook her head from one side to side, more annoyed than she dared admit to herself. If we can't confront him, then we've got nothing. All of this was a waste of time and we're back to square one. How are you so biased about this? I'm not! Yang shouted. Her eyes flashed red for an instant. It took a visible force of will for the girl to calm herself down, and she looked away as she did. When she turned back, Her irises were normal once more, but the faint twist to her lips was still present. I'm not relaxed about this, Blake. Not one bit. I'm just being realistic. I'm looking at the situation and thinking that we want results, not satisfaction. What do you mean? Confronting Jean. Yang said, that'll make us feel better about ourselves. Let us vent and yell at him for being an idiot. But it's not going to change anything, she said, and crossed her arms, leaning back against the classroom door. Do you think, for even admit it, he'd not do it again, just because we told him off for it? Blake knew he would. That was just the kind of stubborn idiot he was. No, she said. Exactly. He'd do it in a flash. The only difference being that he'd take care about it. He'd know we were watching and find a way to do it without us finding out. We'd blow our only advantage. And for what? To make us feel good about catching him? She shook her head. That's why we can't confront him, Blake. All it's going to do is tip him off. Shame welled up inside of her. Had she really wanted to throw the knowledge in his face just for her own satisfaction? She was supposed to be trying to help him, not herself. Her shoulders sagged. She couldn't meet Yang's eyes. I didn't mean to. She broke off when a hand landed on her shoulder. Hey, I know, her partner said. I got angry too, Blake. I just figured it out a little earlier. You're the one who found this info out, so you just had a little longer to get worked up over it. I'm not blaming you or something. Yang's got a point, Sun said. He stepped forward with a wide smile. Besides, doesn't getting emotional about it just show how much you care? I doubt you'd be this angry if it was someone not important to you. Heh, he's right, Blake. For once. Hey! Sun's dismay made her smile, not to mention Yang's teasing. She took a deep breath and let it go, feeling her anger drain away with it. You're right, she said. Both of you. There's not much point going to tell him over it. So, what do we do? Yang grimaced. We use what we have. We know Jean visited those places before you went there, and we're pretty sure we know why, but not the full story. I'll try and talk with my Uncle Crow about it, but for the most part, we just need to watch him and make sure if anything White Fang or criminal related comes up, we can step in to keep an eye on him. I'll help, Sun said. I'm the only one here that everyone knows is a Faunus. You'll be surprised how many Faunus out in Vale openly talk about the White Fang when they don't think any humans are nearby. Blake nodded. It was something Adam had tried to drill into new recruits, but it was always the staunch racists that caused the most trouble. They came in as fanatics, convinced that humans were their enemy and that every Faunus was an ally. It was always a tricky thing, especially since the White Fang needed the fanatic idiots more than they did the desperate ones. One thing is bothering me though, Sun went on. Yang, I don't think you should talk to your uncle about this. Huh? Why not? Uncle Crow was cool. He wouldn't tell Jean. But he would tell Ospen. Blake filled in. She looked over to Sun with a sudden realization. Sun has a point, Yang. Remember that Crow started to train us when Ospen asked him to. He was also put onto our mission by the headmaster, when he just so happens to be the huntsman most involved in fighting against the White Fang right now. Don't you think that's a little convenient? To Yang's credit, it didn't take her long to figure it out. You think Osmond put Crow in charge of Mountain Glen because he was suspicious about Jean? She looked like she wanted to argue about it, but couldn't. That would explain why he spends so much time talking to Jean whenever he trains us. Yeah, it sounds a little too much, Sun said. It sounds like Osmond has an interest in him. Didn't you say earlier you didn't believe what he said about recruiting Jean? I did. Yang sighed. Okay, I guess we'll keep Uncle Crow out of it for now. If things get dangerous though, I think it'd be worth asking him. I wonder what Ozpin wants with Jean though. A flicker of memory came back to her mind. Wildcard. Blake? Yang asked. Wildcard, she repeated, louder this time. That's the password that he had for Jean's file on his terminal. Only Jean's was protected? I don't know, she admitted. I didn't think to check anyone else's. An oversight for sure. It could have determined whether it was for everyone or just Jean's. That it would have brought a lot of answers. Even so, the password is unique enough, isn't it? I'll say. Yang nodded and crossed her arms. What counts as a wild card anyways? Someone unpredictable, Blake answered. A person who doesn't follow the rules. Or a playing card that could have any value, suit, or other property in a game, Sun replied. Curiously specific definition, Sun. He held up his scroll with a guilty smile. Ah, so he'd searched the definition. Still, it was an interesting addition. Someone who could be any value, suit, or color. In a card game, that would be providing incredible flexibility. In fact, it would be overpowered. Game breaking. Blake? That's what he means, she said. A wild card is something that can break rules, expectations, and the game itself. But what game is the headmaster playing? And with who? Considering he had a huntsman close to him attack 3 White Fang warehouses and shut down an operation in Mountain Glen, Sun pointed out, I'd say the who ought to be obvious. As for what kind of game, Blake filled in with a sigh. I'd say a very dangerous one. Sun sighed. This just got even more complicated, didn't it? That's Jean for you. Yang laughed. You can still back out if you want. Blake and I can do this on our own. He's our team leader, and it was the two of us that formed this daughterly duo. I would feel bad if I folded now. Sun sighed and shoved his hands into his pockets. One thing though, if I'm going to be a part of this, can we please change the name? Nope, you're a daughter now. Deal with it. Sorry, son, Blake said. I tried to make her change it when this all started, but... She looked at Yang as though that explained everything. It really did. Just my luck. Any rules? Yeah, Yang nodded. Don't tell Weiss. We're worried she'll freak out, confront him, tie him to a bed, hire a team of crack snipers to watch his every move, completely overreact? Sun listed, expression flat. Yang grinned. All of the above and a few more to boot. Yang held out a hand between them, palm down. Yeah, I figured. Sun laughed and placed his hand above Yang's. Both their eyes flicked to her. You in, Blake? Did they even need to ask? She placed her hand above theirs.